Today we're talking with Steve Boyd, and he's the general manager of Tern North America. Thank you so much, Steve, for participating with us and with my class, and this interaction with practicing entrepreneurs like yourself is what makes the course go. And so it's a really critical piece, and we're appreciative of your participation.
Great. Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that we connected.
Yeah. So where are you today, by the way?
I'm in our office in Long Beach, California. So Long Beach is a little bit south of Los Angeles. So in the big LA metro area.
And I assume that's where the product comes in.
Yeah, so it does. It enters the country at the Port of Los Angeles or Long Beach. They're sort of right next to each other anyway.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it comes here to this office, and then we also have a distribution center in Illinois. So sometimes it goes there by train, actually, from here.
Okay. So how are things out there today in Long Beach?
Well, it's another beautiful day here, and it's tough to complain about the weather, at least. It's very nice. It's this is the time of year where it's a little warmer, but people are going back to school and going back to work, so traffic's a little heavier and everyone's a little more hurried. But we can't complain for sure.
Yeah. Before we get into the business, I'd like to know something about your personal history. So you could just tell us about Steve Boyd.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was actually born in Detroit. My father was an exec. Yeah, my father was an executive in the car business, and
Which company?
He started with Ford, and then he was a dealer briefly, and then he was with Chrysler for most of his career.
Okay.
So all through the 60s, 70s, and through the 80s with Chrysler. So the whole rebuilding with Lee Iacocca and all that, he was all part of that. And he did. His role was actually almost identical to mine, but in the car business, so sort of, he was a distributor. So it's sort of interesting.
So you grew up out here?
Well, I didn't. So that's what I was, we moved around a lot, and then his moves settled down. And when we got to Pittsburgh, so I grew up in Pittsburgh. I went to Virginia Military Institute in Virginia. And then I lived all over the Southeast. I ended up going to work in the bicycle business. I wanted to be a traveling salesman, essentially. And I did that. And I lived all over the Southeast, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida. And I covered Georgia and South Carolina and Tennessee and all that. And then I moved out here, well, a long time ago now, 1996. So I've been out here for 25 years.
And how did you become associated with Tern, and when?
Yeah, so I've been in the bicycle business my whole career, essentially. And I worked for a number of different companies, but I spent about 13 years at Giant, which is sort of a big player, big mainstream bike brand. But I went back to school and got my MBA, and then I decided to take a break from Giant, and I went to work for some of my MBA classmates outside the industry, mostly marketing project type work. And then I knew that I wanted to get back in the bike business. So I ended up at a small high-end company down in Tennessee, and they had financial problems because it was 2008, 2009 crash. So I ended up with another company that made folding bikes called DeHaan. And a number of us, about 10 or 12 of us there, so we saw opportunities in the marketplace that we wanted to pursue, and we tried while we were there, and then we tried to buy the place, and then we just decided to leave and go do our own thing. And that was 10 years ago, and that's how we started Tern.
Oh, wow. So you've been, as you say, doing this bike thing since college, pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much right after school. Yeah.
What motivated that? Why bikes?
Well, I liked, I went to work. Well, I worked in restaurants finishing college, and I loved it. So I thought, oh, I'll own my own restaurant someday. Well, then I went to work in a chain of restaurants and I hated it. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. So I wanted to become a salesman. And my sister, I have a sister who's quite a bit older. And I said, she goes, well, sell something you love, like go into a business you love. If you're going to be a salesman, pick something you love. And I loved bikes. And so I just sort of sat down and figured out how I could get in the bike business. So I went to the local bike shop, and I was sort of friends with one of the guys who worked there, and he got me a job there, and they had 7 stores and they were a big player. So it sort of put me in touch with different people. And then it was a classic story. I went to work for a small company and did well. And then I stepped up to the next size, and then I got on with Giant and, spent a good long period there.
Most of these bikes, most of the industry is centered in Taiwan right now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. The entire bicycle industry globally really revolves around Taiwan. Taiwan's an island south of Japan, off of China, and even if the bicycles aren't made in Taiwan, a lot of the engineering and the design and all that stuff still handles there. It's sort of like Detroit was to the car business, where they centered their resources, and so if the engine company built a factory down the street from Ford or GM, and then the body company and that sort of thing, it's almost identical to that. Or Stuttgart in Germany is kind of the same way for European cars.
Yeah.
So Taiwan became that place, and essentially what happened was Japan, when bicycles went offshore from here because costs were getting high and that sort of thing, they went to Japan briefly, but they got really expensive really fast. And Taiwan more or less threw up their hand and said, we want to do it. And they developed the engineering strengths and the infrastructure and that sort of thing. And it just became this cluster that really grew. And that's how we got to the spot.
So you were mentioning a few minutes ago that you were part of this founding team of 10 or so people that started Tern.
Yeah, there were 10 or 11 of us from all around the world, actually. There were 4 of us here in the States, 2 American guys that lived in Taiwan, couple guys in Germany, 1 in the UK, 1 in Shanghai. Oh, and our lead designer, who's in Finland, actually. So the 12 of us, just one, the boss said, hey, I think we should leave and go do our own thing. And we all said, all right, we're in. And that was that.
And what was motivating that, aside from, the economic opportunity? What was the focus of the company when you started? What need were you trying to address?
Well, we saw, the way I explain it is, we saw opportunities in the marketplace that we couldn't go after, right? So we tried to go after them there, but there was too much resistance and or other factors that were in our way. And basically we wanted to make a better bicycle for urban transportation, because we wanted to really focus on cities and relatively short distance mobility in cities. And we also we used to say we wanted to play well with others. So we wanted it to be able to be bus friendly and train friendly and apartment friendly and elevator friendly. And a regular bike is frequently not all that friendly with those other things. So we set out to build a far better folding bike. Basically, we started just making folding bikes, and we wanted a folding bike that didn't look and feel like a contraption, because most of them did.
And these were not electric initially.
They were not electric. Yeah. This was 10 years ago. So we just had our 10th anniversary. So in 2011, electric bikes were starting to take off in Europe, but not nearly, what they are here today.
Yeah. Yeah. And this notion of bikes in cities, again, that was not big here until, it seems to be starting to get traction now, but 10 years ago, it didn't seem to be.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, no one was focused on it. Certainly, there were people that sold a lot of bikes in cities, but it was more or less by accident. It wasn't a concerted effort to make a product that addressed the needs of an urban dweller.
Yeah. So who do you see as the target customers for your bikes now? And I'm thinking particularly about the electric bikes.
Yeah. So again, we're still highly urban focused. Obviously, an electric bike has a little more range. So we know that people are only going to ride so far, and especially because of the weather and all that sort of thing. So an electric bike greatly expands that pie. So you can, instead of just being right in the middle of the city, now if you live 5 miles outside the city, you can still use the bike as your transportation.
Yeah.
So our target is people who are looking for it as their transportation.
Hmm.
So it's not a bike. It's not a bike to go out and ride 100 miles on the weekend. Those are fun, but there are people who are experts at making those bikes, and that's not our focus.
Hmm.
So we're looking for people who maybe they live in an apartment, maybe they still need it to be very mobile. Our bikes are elevator friendly. Even the cargo bikes are elevator friendly, and we did that on purpose, and that's very unique about us.
Hmm.
But it's really about car replacement ultimately, or other method replacement.
Yeah. So would you say, in terms of age range, is there a focus?
Well, what's interesting is, yeah, I mean, certainly, 30s and 40s end up being a focus.
Hmm.
It can dip below that if you're, depending on where you are, but our bikes are sort of premium priced too. So, a college student or someone straight out of college maybe can't or doesn't want to spend that much money on one of those yet. So our demographic turns out to be a little bit older,
Hmm.
inherently.
Hmm. And income level, you mentioned that people coming out of school typically don't want to spend that kind of money. But what would you say is a sweet spot in terms of income range for your
Oh,
customers?
I think the majority of the people running our bikes are in the 75 to over 100,000 demographic.
Mm-hmm. And so you're selling to individuals, but I also my daughter actually lives in New York, and she lives near a Whole Foods. I think I sent you a picture
Yeah.
earlier
Yep.
today of all of these Tern cargo bikes outside the Whole Foods. I guess they use them to deliver all around, the neighborhood there. Is there a
Yeah.
B2B component to this?
Yeah, so that's a new section for us. What we call it bikes for business. So we feel like there's a really big opportunity for bicycles to be used for deliveries in dense areas. So, you've been to New York, your daughter lives there. Obviously, parking's a problem, getting a truck around there is a problem, that sort of thing. So, if you have a bicycle, and many of those bikes, many of the Tern bikes there are connected to trailers. So, between those two, they can go to Whole Foods and they can make dozens of deliveries using that bike and trailer far easier than you can if you needed to put that in a van and drive around New York and look for a place to park outside of every building, and walk upstairs and come back.
Mhm.
So, and obviously it's far less expensive to operate a bicycle, even an electric bike, a nice one, than it is to operate a motor vehicle of any sort.
Yeah.
Um, so we feel like there's a huge opportunity there, and we think that stretches all the way to factories. If you go to any sort of big plant, there's a whole number of pickup trucks and golf carts and stuff driving around with one guy in it with a hammer in his hand, and we feel like there's a lot of opportunity there. um, and then college campuses the same way. The maintenance team or the IT guy doesn't necessarily need a giant pickup truck to come do tech support, at U of M or something like that. So we feel like there's some opportunity there.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of revenue streams, you've got the sales to individuals, and then you've got this business market. I'm assuming the business is much smaller right now than the individual market.
Yeah, that's true. It's a pretty small fraction right now, but it's brand new. I mean, our first transactions in that scene were just within the last, say, 18 months.
Yeah. And then you've got one of the things I'm impressed with about Tern is the first of all, how well the thing is thought through, but the accessories that are available for this thing. So there's an accessory business that must be a decent component.
Yeah, it's quite robust. In order for the bike to be useful, you need to be able to carry things, whether that's, you might want to carry a child or two to school. You might want to carry your groceries home. You might want to make deliveries like we were talking about a second ago. And that's no single, setup, right? So we need to make the bikes flexible so that you want to carry your groceries and I want to carry my children and somebody else wants to deliver pizzas. It has to be modular, if you want to call it that. Yeah. So we work really hard to develop accessories that really expand the capabilities of the product. And we've been quite successful with that.
So how do people get the product? How do they get the bike?
So we distribute, majority of our distribution is through independent specialty retailers. So the bike shop that's in a town like Ann Arbor or anywhere else, we sell largely through them. Mm-hmm. We do also distribute through REI. We have a long-standing relationship with them before we even founded Tern. Yeah. So we sell through some of their stores as well. And then we do sell direct to consumer, but mostly on the accessories, what we call gear items. So, you buy your GSD in New York from the dealer, and maybe they don't have the exact basket that you want or the exact luggage rack or something like that. So frequently people will get home and they'll start doing the research online and they'll go, oh, that's the one I want. So then they just buy that direct from us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So thinking about what it takes to execute a business like this, give me some idea of the activities that you all have to engage in to make this business successful. Where do you spend the bulk of your resources and your time, at Tern to make this business successful?
Well, I'd say there's two really big buckets where we spend lots of our time. One is what we collectively call service. So that service might be helping the bike shop understand the product better so that they can sell it to the end user better. And then supporting them directly. So, bikes need maintenance, they need to be, kept up, that sort of thing. So part of that is having the knowledge and the spare parts on hand and the teaching materials to teach them, how to handle the unique stuff about our bike. Excuse me. And then, but a big part of that is the service to the end user. So our bikes are really quite unique. I mean, people go, oh, a bike's a bike. Well, it's true in that it has two wheels and pedals and you ride it, balancing. But beyond that, our bikes are pretty specialized, pretty specialty. So it requires a different amount of support in our mind. So we work really hard in that area, sort of that collective service bucket. Mm-hmm. And then the other part of the business where we spend a lot of time and energy is what you might call planning or purchasing, procurement, because the lead times on bicycles are very long. So long before the pandemic, the lead time on a regular bicycle was something like 180 days. So that means you have to place your order 180 days before you want that product. So you can imagine if you want a bunch of bikes in March when the weather turns nice in Michigan, you have to order those bikes in October. And how do you know, you have to guess to some degree, what color does that is going to be popular this year and which models are going to be popular. And now the lead time is triple that. So as bikes get more complex, especially the electric ones, the motors and the batteries and all those parts, the lead times get really long. So we're forecasted right now through the end of 2023. So they're already starting to tell us about 2024 products so we can plan accordingly, and that stuff won't be here for basically 2 years from now. So so you can imagine the complexity that adds to the market, or to the planning process when you go, what are we going to need 2 years from now? Well, how could we possibly know what are we going to need 2 years from now, So
the logistics is one big bucket. And
and then of course right now with the world the way it is, I'm sure you and your students have all heard about the actual logistics system delays, whether it's containers and port congestion, all that stuff. There's all that to worry about. Things like we buy batteries for our Bosch bikes. Well, if we don't have the bikes here, we don't need the batteries. Well, so Bosch says, hey, we got your batteries here. We got your, but we don't have the bikes for another 3 months or longer. So that whole process about, hey, Bosch, can we not take those batteries right now? And plan them out a little bit better, that sort of thing. So we definitely spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah. Now, relative to that, how big an activity is the marketing and sales?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's obviously the third leg of the stool. And we have, when you've been here for 10 years, we have a pretty deep dealer base now, so that we've known many have, we have many dealers that were here when we started 10 years ago. We don't have a lot of turnover. So we have pretty good relationships, and now we've had some products that have been quite successful for us and for them and for the end user. So they sort of look to us to lead that place. So from a sales standpoint, especially in the market conditions right now, it's not rocket science to go, hey, we made this great product. You have demand for it. We have demand for it. They finally arrived. Let's get them rolling to you. But the marketing part is where we, we do have to market to them, obviously, but we really need to market to the end user to drive that desire, that demand from that standpoint, so that we're pulling them in to check out our stuff. And then they're saying, hey, where can I find it? And then they're pivoting to our, retailers, that sort of thing.
Now, what about engineering, design?
Yeah, so design and engineering. So I operate the North American distributorship. So we don't maintain hard engineers or designers here for our team. Most of that's done on the global basis. So when we talked about those founders earlier, the one lead designer is in Finland. A couple of those guys are engineers that are in Taiwan. But we have a pretty big team. So even those of us that aren't engineers or designers do a lot of hands-on testing and that sort of thing. So we have a couple people on our staff here that are members of the product team. So they're working on those projects that are, 1 or 2 years out, like we were talking about. But you said at some point, I think you said the products are so well thought out. Well, that's because we're all really using them. When we designed the first GSD, for example, we were all testing different variations of it all around the world, all at the same time. And, I had 2 kids I was taking to school on it, and the guy in Finland was riding it in the middle of the winter. So he knew what it needed to do there. We did things like the vertical standing, which makes it elevator friendly. That's really unique. And that grew out of all our situation and our desire to really go after that urban market.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even just the use of 20-inch wheels. So
Yeah.
because of our experience on the folding bikes, we are 20-inch wheel experts.
Yeah.
So how they ride, how to use them, how to make the bike, how to engineer the bike so that it rode well.
Yeah.
Because anybody can take something and go, oh, put two wheels on it, make a frame in the middle and ride it. Well, you may not want to ride it. It might not be comfortable. It might not be efficient. So our expertise, our collective expertise, drives that train. So, and things like the accessories, we're like, people go, oh, I need to haul 2 Trader Joe's bags home from the grocery store, so, or Whole Foods bags. So, the bag must be this big, and then the guy that lives in, the guy that lives in Switzerland says it has to last. It has to be made of this material so that it lasts 5 years under this use. And the guy and the guys in Taiwan are like, it has to be watertight because it rains here all the time, that sort of thing. And that's how we've ended up with a lot of really great products.
Mm-hmm. So, with this whole thing with the electrification of bikes just seems to be exploding now. And it's like everybody and their brother is coming out with electric bikes and, different technologies and whatnot. I see, the Rads have got some things that are, it's almost like they're copies in terms of the form factor anyway. But how do you separate, yourselves from the other manufacturers out there? What's special about Tern, and what key resources do you have that separate you from the others?
Yeah, so a good question. I mean, in our world, there's sort of a natural separation between what we call specialty and non-specialty. So specialty are the bikes that you find in a bike shop, whether it's my electric bikes or a fancy carbon fiber road bike, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And those bikes, and they have engineering resources and testing, safety testing and compliance and all kinds of things that people don't really think about, but you need that if you're going to charge a premium and you're going to have a premium product. Then there's all this, like, you could call it off the shelf stuff, which is just, you go over to a factory. You and I could go over to a factory tomorrow with a gold card and come back with Tarver Boyd bikes.
Yeah.
And they would look and act like a Rad or some of these other department store, level bikes. Yeah. But they're not going to last. They have no support. So, if you get the number one complaint right now in bike shops is, I can't get any, people want me to fix these bikes, but I can't get any parts for them. No one will call me back, that sort of thing. Yeah. Many of them, I can't speak for Rad, but many of them, we can tell by looking at them that they don't pass the same tests that we put ours through, in terms of safety. I mean, look, if you're putting 2 kids on the back of a bike and you're going to take them to school and it's going to involve a hill and everything else, we have to feel really good about the design and the construction and the parts and the testing and everything else on that bike. So what happens is that when you see that bike and when you touch that bike and when you ride that bike and when you ask owners about their bike, it becomes obvious to people. Yeah. It's not for everybody. Not everybody has that budget. Not everybody is ready. What we see is that there's lots of people that buy a low-end bike and they go to experiment with, and they go, oh, I kind of like riding this. And I could ride this to school, or I could take my kids to school on it, or I could replace some car trips. And then they step up, I mean, it's not unlike, automobiles as a parallel where there's the, less expensive brands. And then there's the premium brands. There's the Mercedes and the BMWs and that sort of thing. So, we would like, one of our core missions is what we call access. We've called it that ever since the beginning. And part of access is the price. So when we started in the folding bike business, we purposely had bikes at $349 because we knew that not everybody could afford our $1,500 fancy one, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's even tougher on the electric side now. And of course, with prices rising due to all kinds of different factors, it's really hard to hit attractive price points. But we would love to offer a bike at $14.99 like Rad does, but we can't get there with all the stuff that we feel we have to put it through to make it a Tern. So we'll keep working at it, and we keep working with our trusted suppliers and that sort of thing to make the bikes more affordable. But you'd be hard pressed to catch up to that.
What are the key technologies that go into the bike now, and that, as you look forward, what are the technology drivers there for this electric bike business?
Yeah, well, certainly motor capacity, motor size, motor weight, motor design, motor efficiency, and then batteries. Everyone's talking, of course, about batteries. The difference between how long a phone lasts today to how long it lasted, even 5 years ago, is tremendous. How the form factor of those batteries, obviously, with the advent of electric cars, people are becoming more aware of battery capacity and how it works. And hey, I want this car, but I need more range than 50 or 100 miles. So we have to develop battery technology. Yeah. So every time we make an advancement in batteries, we either get lighter weight and smaller form factor, which is helpful, or we get greater range, which is helpful. And the same goes for the motor. Our primary partner is Bosch, and they keep working to take the size of and the weight of the motor down, because that's helpful to all things, obviously, and make it more efficient. So the more efficient it gets, the better the range is. Then maybe you don't need such a big battery, all that sort of thing. And then once you leave that, you go into bikes. Then you go into bicycles pretty much have adopted hydraulic disc brakes, which is the way cars are stopped. So braking is more efficient. Things like flat proof tires, because if you have a 60-pound cargo bike and you get a flat tire, then what do you do? So because you can't just pick it up, throw it in your friend's car, and get a ride to the bike shop necessarily. Yeah. So there's things going on there as well.
Okay. And I see you mentioned Bosch. Obviously, Bosch is a key partner with you all for the drivetrain. And just thinking about partners, you were talking about your retailers before as a group. What other key partners would you say help drive the business?
Well, our supply chain in general, right? So bicycles are not like, we don't own our own factory and have our own employees that walk outside and weld up our bikes and paint them and that sort of thing. The vast majority of specialty bicycles come from 10 or 12 factories around the world. And so it's as if some factory is making they're making a Ford Explorer and a Chevrolet pickup truck and a Mercedes, whatever, all in the same factory. Now, may or may not be at the same time or on the same assembly line, but they're jobbers, some people call them, but they're factories. So in our case, we play with a really big, capable, professional, clean, relatively green, fair labor practice factory. So even though we're a relatively small player, we punch above our weight because we have this really powerful supply chain behind us. So things that you don't think about, like right now, our factory's in Vietnam. Well, Vietnam is shut down on a mandatory national shutdown. Oh, wow. And they've been shut down for, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks so far. Well, our factory, they don't have financial problems. They don't have labor problems. They managed to get all their employees vaccinated. So they continue to stockpile all the raw materials and everything they need to restart production. And if you're with a small factory, they might not have the resources to do that. So they're obviously a key partner of ours for sure. And then once we leave the United States, we have other distributors around the world that do what I do in, Germany and Japan and South America and that sort of thing. And they're obviously, vital strategic partners to us as well.
Yeah. It's crazy about this thing with the COVID in Vietnam. At first, everybody was marveling that, oh, Vietnam has had no cases, no deaths, right, for the first several months, and now all of a sudden it's it's exploded.
And I mean, Taiwan went through that too. So Taiwan did a hard lockdown virtually immediately. So all of our people were there, and none of us could go there, and they had virtually no cases. And then they've had a couple small blips, but their blips don't compare to us because they're very respectful. Ever since SARS, which was, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, it's very common in Taiwan in particular to see people wearing masks. People stay home if they don't feel well. They may or may not still do their work, but they learned their lesson then. So it was a surprise to us that Vietnam got hit that hard. It's not a surprise that they reacted the way that they did, but it was a surprise. We kind of thought they were out of the woods. But the one thing that we did know is that vaccines were late getting to Asia. So the reason Taiwan didn't open back up is because they couldn't vaccinate. So they kept it tight and shut down. I mean, we had people come from there to here to get vaccinated. So yeah, with any luck, we'll be able to get that factory going again. But they have, I mean, things there, life is so different there. Many of those folks, when the factory shut down, they made their way back to their provincial homes with their families, their extended families. Well, now they can't come back because they're not allowed to travel, that sort of thing. So it will take time to get that factory back up to speed. They'll lose some people that can't get back or decide not to come back, and then they'll have to retrain new people and that sort of thing. So it'll take, even if you flipped a switch tomorrow, everyone was vaccinated, COVID was gone, and you are full speed ahead, it'll take you months to get, back to some semblance of normal.
Yeah. So are you able to, I guess you're not able to meet the demand right now, but how do you see that playing out over the coming months?
Yeah, we were forecasted already for two big years, last year and this year. So we were fortunate that we were ready because we were already growing really fast. And we had these great products that we bet big on. But we, meaning the operation here in North America, our inventory is starting to dwindle. We have some containers already here in the United States. Some have been here for weeks and weeks and weeks that we can't get out of the ports and off the trains and all that stuff. So when we get those, that will be helpful. We'll be able to meet some demand there. But once those are gone, we're at the mercy of the factories starting back up. We have some completed product at the factory that they should be able to ship relatively quick. But after that, then we're waiting.
So just to jump back for a second, what are the main components of the cost for an electric bike that you folks manufacture?
Well, by far the
rank order.
Yeah, so by far the battery first, then the motor second, and everything else is a way distant third. After that, probably the labor and the transportation is probably the third, biggest factor for me. Yeah.
So thinking about just how the market looks here in the U.S., what are the cities where you have the biggest uptake of your product?
Well, The Bay Area is our number one market. And then, Seattle and Portland, progressive, urban, outdoorsy, young, affluent. Those all make sense. Southern California is big just because of its sheer size. It's not necessarily because everyone is adopting it, because getting around here is a challenge at times because of the distances, that sort of thing. And then when you leave there, Vancouver's a huge market for us, because remember, we're North America, so we do Canada. So Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, those are all big markets for us for the same reasons, affluent and in those towns are even more progressive in terms of transportation initiatives, that sort of thing. They're more like Europe. People are more accustomed to using a bike to get around. And then, of course, the Eastern Seaboard, New York's big because of its density. We do really well there. We always have. And then we're growing in the DC area. We do okay in Boston. It's not a huge market, but it's good. Chicago.
Yeah.
And then when you leave there, then it's pockets. Austin, Texas, big college town. We've been operating there since day one, so they know us, and that's a good town. And then, you go to other specific places where we have good ones. But part of that is also about retailers, partners. So if you have any moderate sized town, whether it's Detroit or Denver or Pittsburgh and Cleveland, towns like that are a little bit smaller, but any good sized town, Atlanta, they can easily support a pretty healthy business. And in those towns where we have a committed retailer who's committed not only to us, but he's also committed to sort of this type of customer, this lifestyle transportation customer, we do really well. In a town where we can't find the only retailers we have are the guys who are into the fast racing bikes and the crazy mountain bikes. They sell some bikes, but it's not a big ticket for them. So we like to say, look, we're only one good retailer away from any town being a pretty big market for us.
Well, the interesting thing to me about the retailers is, these folks a few years ago were selling bikes, right? Selling non-electric bikes, and they're lucky if they get $1,000 for a bike. Now it's like every bike they sell at the specialty place is like a car sale. So to me, it looks like they should be jumping up and down and doing a lot better than they were doing a few years ago.
Well, they are. There's no doubt about that. They're just like my revenue model changed, right? We used to sell $1,000 acoustic bikes. Now we sell $5,000 electric bikes. So so you can imagine how much different my business is than it's 8 years ago. And theirs is the same. Like you said, they were selling $1,000 bikes, and now they're selling $5,000 bikes. Their challenge is they still have all the same operational challenges they had, staffing, technical expertise, training, that sort of thing. So they're no longer running a $2 million business. They might be running a $5 million business, but they still can't find good help, still can't find a bike mechanic, so those challenges are all still there, and the stakes are higher, because if a person's buying a $5,000 or $6,000 bike, their level of interest in their enjoyment or use of that bike is far greater than, no, I bought a $500 bike and I don't ride it that much. Big deal, right? So it's changed things a lot, for sure.
So now going back to the technology thing and just the whole competitive picture, I see some parallels, with the car industry. You and a lot of other manufacturers are partnered with Bosch, and there's a key cost component there. Then you have some other people who are going on their own way in proprietary drivetrains, and and that kind of thing, or Chinese drivetrains. Uh, but
Right.
you know, do you see that as a threat or an opportunity in terms of, you know, bringing that drivetrain in house, or does it make sense with all the resources and you know, expertise that Bosch has to even consider that?
Well, there are a number. Bosch is by far the leader in this space, in the specialty channel,
Yeah.
and there are a number of other quality setups. You know, Yamaha is
Mm,
in this
yeah.
now, and there are a number of others. Shimano, which is a big, long-standing bicycle component, company, and they make fishing gear, obviously too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, when you have choices like Bosch and Shimano and Yamaha, it makes it a lot harder to swallow that pill to go, oh, we want to hire a bunch of motor engineers and battery engineers. Um, and what and where people get into trouble is they buy a motor from this company, and then they buy a battery from that company, and then they buy a controller from this company, all to drive the price down. But
Mhm.
all those systems have to not only work together, but they have to talk to each other, properly, and that can be a big problem.
Mm,
So when we buy a system from Bosch, it's a system. It's a
yeah.
battery. It's the mount for the battery. It's the controller. It's the brain. I mean, it's all of it together. So we know that we can design our bike around Bosch's, form factor, if you will, and come up with a product that has a great drive system. Now
Yeah.
we have to make the rest of the bike great, but we know we have this great foundation.
Yeah.
Um, so if you think about, like, in the truck business, um, there are four big diesel motor companies. There's Cummins, Caterpillar, Allison, and I forget who else, but Volvo, I think. But the point is, an 18 wheeler is a lot like a bike because it's made of a whole bunch of components. They buy the brakes from so and so, and they buy the wheels from so and so, and they buy the cab from somebody, and then they buy a Cummins motor, and then they buy an XYZ transmission, because they know that they're going to hold up and last a long time. And
Mhm.
that's the way we look at our bikes. Like, we want our bike to last you 5, 6, 10 longer years.
Mhm.
And in order to make a bike, if you're going to use it regularly and you're going to enjoy the experience for the long run, we know we've got to use the good stuff.
Mhm.
So I don't foresee a time where we Tern ends up designing our own motor or batteries.
Mhm. So I just have a couple more questions. So
Yeah,
looking ahead uh, at the landscape out there. Oh, I forgot one thing. I wanted to ask you
yeah,
aside. I asked you about the U.S. in terms of the cities here.
yeah.
In terms of the countries, what are the, you know, where is the biggest uptake for Tern? Just looking around the world.
Well, Germany is by far the biggest specialty bike market in the world. It's
Mm,
it's sort of crazy.
mm,
Um, they they sell Germany sells as many specialty bikes each year as the U.S. does.
mm,
Um, so people there, they're into the lifestyle. They buy and they upgrade and they hand down and they just keep going through these bikes.
yeah.
So that's a big market. Um, the When we were just doing folding bikes, then it went to places like Japan and Malaysia, where they're either dense or they have big populations, that sort of thing. But now that we're on the electric side mostly, we're probably the number 2 or 3 market now for Tern.
Mm,
But there's a tremendous amount of upside. The UK is rapidly adopting, electric bike technology and bicycle infrastructure.
yeah.
They're a few years ahead of us. They're a few years behind Germany, and they're a few years ahead of us.
Yeah.
So that's a big market for us. And then we have a lot of, we have a lot of runway here, because it's a relatively small piece of the pie now. We have a lot of runway in a lot of places.
Mhm.
Now there are, South America is difficult because it's a difficult business climate. They have a lot of currency fluctuations, and then they have income challenges, with our super premium price bikes. So there are places where the upside is going to be a longer, it's going to be a longer ride for sure.
Mhm. So looking toward the future, what are the opportunities that excite you in this area with the electric bikes?
Well, most certainly the bikes for business component, this commercial segment, if you want to call it that, dense urban delivery, we think is a huge thing. I mean, the DHL, which is, you've heard of DHL,
Yep,
they're
yep.
partners with Deutsche Post. Deutsche Post is the Dutch post office. It'd be like USPS here.
Yeah.
So they're partners. Well, they have 17,000 electric bikes in service
Oh my
in
goodness.
Germany, bikes and trikes, some with trailers, and they have another 5,000 on order that they can't get their hands on. And when DHL wanted to do a test in the United States market, they bought 4 bikes in Miami to test. So when you think about the scale, the upside, that commercial component is big. Now it's also challenging because it's price sensitive. It's a really long sales process. I mean, nobody buys 10,000 of these $5,000 bikes without thinking about it and researching it and lining up all the support, hopefully, and everything that goes with it. So the sales process is much longer than it is when somebody walks into a bike shop and says, "Man, that's a cool bike. I think I'd like to use it to take my kids to school," and that sort of thing. So it has its challenges, but that's where the upside is. For sure.
And so, thinking about the fact that these students are going to be looking at your business and your business model and thinking about, what challenges they can address or help to address as you look forward, what challenges do you think, a bright, motivated group of young people could help you address and look at?
Well, certainly one of the things that we look at a lot, and we haven't had a lot of traction yet, is how to reach those industrial customers, those commercial customers. So imagine if I wanted to sell bikes to Domino's Pizza. How do I get in front of Domino's? How do I get their attention? How do I prove to them that this is viable? How do I show them how much money they'll save and how much carbon dioxide they'll take out of the atmosphere by using these bikes? Those are our challenges. Everyone goes, "Oh, it makes sense to have a person on an electric bike instead of a pickup truck on a factory lot." Sure. Yeah. But we still have to convince them. We still have to show them that. We have to confine them. We have to convince them. And that's our challenge, especially for me. So you can imagine if Ford or Mercedes-Benz, who sells a lot of those Sprinter vans, they have that audience, right? They're already talking to the delivery. They're already talking to UPS and FedEx and DHL and Amazon about delivery. So if they go, "Oh, we got this bike now," well, then they have that audience already. So we got 10 people here, right? How do I reach? Yeah. And we're already busy. So how do I reach all those people? Yeah. That's certainly something that we consider and contemplate and examine and have a hard time getting traction on, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, well, that sounds interesting. And I think that's the kind of thing that these students would love to sink their teeth into. So I look forward to, having that interaction between you and them.
Well, good. Me too.
Yeah, so I really appreciate this, as I said before. And I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
sure.
And just stay on for